All right, so good morning. Today is Daf Tzadi. Hey, we left off actually on the bottom of Tzadi Dalet on the base, and away we go. Let's get to work. Let me find it where we are. I think Tashma, fourth wide line on Tzadi Dalet on the base. So Tashma, come and listen. Hagazlanim umalavi beribis. So people who thieves, robbers, and those who charge interest, even though they already collected, machzir, they return it. In other words, they return that which they took. So the Gemara says, Gazlanim, mashagavu, ika, right? Igazel, vilo gazel, lo gazel. I understand what you're talking about, right? In other words, in the case of interest, so yes, so he collected the interest, and he got the loan and the interest and all that. But Gazlanim, what does it mean, right? Even though they took it, they return it, right? Either they're thieves, and if they didn't take it, then they're not thieves. So Ela Ema HaGazlanim, rather, what does this mean? HaGazlanim Umay Nihu, and who are the Gazlanim? That is Malavi Rivers. Those are people who charge interest. And V'yafavi Shagabu, and even though that they went ahead and collected Machzir, so you say, Ami Machzir, Ema Kalam Mehem, so he says, wait, they return. Machzir. So why am I Machzir? Then we say they don't collect, they don't take that money back. In order basically to fulfill their obligation of doing tshuva. So we are on Tzadi Dalet on Beis Tzadi, halfway down in the wide lines. So Toshma, or maybe like 6 lines from the bottom. Haroyim, v'hagavoyim, avamuchsin, shuvasan kasha. Right, the shepherds and the tax collectors. For them to do tshuva is difficult. In other words, they go ahead and they collect things that are really not due to them, and therefore it's really they're stealing, and therefore for them to do tshuva is difficult. Umachzirin, lamakirin, and if they go ahead and know who they took the money from, then they return it. So I'm machzirin ve'im mekalim mehen. So you see they do go ahead and return it. He says no, you return it, but we're not mekalim mehen. If that's the case, why they return it? So let's say in order to go ahead and fulfill their obligation to the Shemai. If they have to return it, but they don't really have to return it because they don't aim a kalmahan. So why is it so difficult? And furthermore, aim a sefer. The sefer says v'shema kirin. They don't know who they took it from. So Yasavan Sarkit Sibor, they should go ahead and donate money to the communal funds. Give the money back there. What is that referring to? Right, different things on public works and the like. Right, there was a takana. Right, one is before the takana, one is after the takana. That was originally they had to go ahead and return it, but once there was a takana that, let's say, someone stole it and they didn't have the object just to return it, so they had to go and sell other assets in order to go ahead and do tshuva. So therefore, they don't have to go ahead and return. It's too difficult to do it. So Lakash can cut and that was after. So Gemara says 2 lines to the bottom. Right now we say that there's a takana. In other words, when it's not around. In other words, that it's very difficult to go ahead and if I don't have the item here, what am I supposed to return? I gotta start selling my assets. Even you could say both these cases, right? There's one after the kana. So why in one case do you go ahead and return while the other one's not? Like Kasha, can the gzela kayamis. One is the case with the gzelas kayamis, and therefore that's when you have to go ahead and return the object. The kamshen gzela kayamis. That was the case where the item is not in existence. The verse says Iva avnit. So this whole case is brought down when he says, I'm going to go ahead and return my stuff. And then his wife says, what do you mean? Even your belt, you're going to have to return. You're going to have nothing. So understand. So why was the avnate so difficult? Even your belt. So the belt is there. Just give back the belt. So my avnate, what does it mean? To may avnate means the value of the belt. We call heifta. The gzela kayamis law of the rabbanan takana. But if the item is not, we call heifta the gzela kayamis. Right, where the item is in existence, right? Law of the Rabbanan Takana. So the Rabbanan did not make a Takana. In other words, you just have to give back the item. Right? So let's say someone goes ahead and steals a beam, right? It's built into, let's say, a house. See, but Tanan Alamarisha Gazal Shabana Babira, it was going ahead and built into a house. Sheito Dama, right? You go ahead and take the money. You don't have to go ahead and take down the house. Rather, you pay the value for the beam. If you don't take us a Shabbat. Right, so the Gemara says that's Shani. So the Gemara says no. Shani Hasam the cave on the Ikapsi the beer Shavi Rabbana Kedelese. Since there's such a large loss was built into the house, so therefore basically they made it as if kilo is non-existent, and therefore just go ahead and pay the value of it. Fine. 2 dots on the top of this is today's daf. So the Gemara Gozel Para. So Mishnah said, if a guy went ahead and stole a cow that was pregnant and it gave birth, so turn it up on. Let's see what's going on here. Hagoizel Rachel, the Gozel Para the Yoda, one who goes ahead and steals a sheep, let's say that's ready to go ahead and have its wool shorn, or a para that was pregnant. V'yalda, and then it goes ahead and gives birth, or he shares it. So Mishalim Aisa, so he has to go ahead and pay Mishalim Aisa. He has to go ahead and give it all back, right? Now, as he returns everything according to Rameir. So the stolen item goes back as is. We see that its value as if basically at the time of the theft, and we'll also go ahead and see what the difference is between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. So now, so let's concentrate on Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir seems to say you give it all back. Now, my time to Rabbi Meir. What's the reason Rabbi Meir? Do you hold that even though there's a physical change, nevertheless, it's still in its original place, i.e., it's still owned by the person. So let's say Yigal owns an animal, and I steal it, right? So even though the animal gave birth, or I sheared it, nevertheless, the animal, even though it's a physical change, it's still been made, and therefore it's still Yigal's. Therefore, he gets, either the offspring if it gave birth, or the wool, or the animal. It doesn't make a difference. It goes to Yigal. What did you say?
It's now been made by you.
No, it's yours. You own it.
Right.
So even though I took it,
you possess it now.
Nevertheless, even though it's a shinui, I should change possessions with a shinui. It's like a new object. No, the shinui according to Amir, and that's the reason why when I get busted, I got to give everything back. I got to give back the baby or the wool and the animal. I Dilma. Bialma, normally we say shinui kaina. Really, we say that shinui, if there's a physical change, so therefore, since it's like a new item, and therefore the Gazan really should go ahead and acquire it. And over here, it's a kanas. In other words, a kanas that I shouldn't be able to basically benefit chaytan iskar, right? I shouldn't be able to go ahead and benefit from my stealing. So let's say the animal gets weaker, because if we say that there was no improvement, the animal actually, I didn't feed it, and therefore the animal is less value, I can say, even though there's a shinoi b'mkaima I made, and Yigal, take your animal back, and I'm not responsible to pay to pay you the difference. So Tashma, come and listen. So Gazal behema vizkina. Person steals an animal, he has it by him for a while, gets old, or avadim, I steal his slave, vizkino, and he gets old, not as valuable. Mishalim kashas hagzela. You pay the time of the gzela when you stole it. And Remeir Aimer, the avad, when it comes to avadim, Amer lo, just take it back. Take back your effort. Now, it's even though he's less valuable, right? I stole, 25-year-old young guy. You return it to, I don't want to offend anyone here. An 106-year-old man, right? I don't think anyone here is offended. Anyone here 106? Okay, we're good, right? So he returns a 106-year-old avid. He says, "Here, Harei shachal afanacha, v'ilu behema." Sounds like it's only the avid he returns as is, but the animal he doesn't just say, "Here, take it back." And if you'd say that even though it's a physical change, it's still in its original state, i.e., it's still owned by the guy who I stole it from. Even the behemoth, I should be able to go and say, "Here, take it back." Shmami, no, it must be that really he acquires it. But and why is he returning the other cases? Shmami, no, ksaver meir shinoi kaina. Really, a shinoi is kaina. And therefore it was a kanas.
So Avadin considers.
So
Avadin is like a land.
very good. Let's see. Very good. Very good. We're gonna get there. So Amar Rabbi Meir. So says that. So you see, it's according to him must be that just a kanas. Rabbi Meir, no. The divrei of the Rabbanan Kamar. Maybe he's saying according to the Rabbanan. The deed to excuse me. Kamar the deed according to me. Shino ain't no kaina. A shino is not kaina, and therefore v'afila behema nami. Even an animal, right? Afila behema nami. Right, and therefore I didn't acquire. Therefore, even the animal I can just go ahead and give back. But according to you guys, that means the shinoi kaina that you say really shinoi is kaina, and therefore the thief should acquire it. Ideally, mihas the avdak mekarka dami. Right, admit to me at least that an avid is like karka, and therefore a karka can't be stolen. The karka and exelis, right? It can't be stolen. It's right there, and therefore since it was never stolen. Right here, harei shachal fanecha. Right, so since the avid was never stolen, harei shachal fanecha. But as opposed to an animal, which is movable, they said no. Rabbanan lo. No, and eved in this regard is more similar to metaltalin, and therefore you can't just say harei shalcha lefanach. Fine, Tashma, come and listen. So let's say litzvalo adam litzavu shachor. So let's say I go ahead to the dyer and I say, hey, do me a favor, dye this red. And he dyes it black, or a shachor says dye it black. Let's have other. It makes it red. Aimer. So now the guy comes out to pick up his wool, and he says, "What's this?" He says, "Here's your black." I say, "I want it red." Exactly. So what does he say? Aimer. Nice and like the mate. So the store owner basically reimburses him for his wool, and that's it. So the beit are he only pays them for the wool that he gave him, but he does not get the improvements. In other words, the shopkeeper keeps the improvements. And if you say that any sort of change is not kainet, the meitzin of a shivcha, right? So therefore, since he did a physical change, right? By dyeing it, so if there was a physical change. So if a physical change causes right an ownership change, so therefore it should go from the possession of the client, right, into the possession of the dyer, right? So and therefore, since the dyer gets it, so and if it's ain't a kind that does not acquire, so therefore it's still all the original owners give it back to the client, even though it's red now, it's more valuable, but he gets to them. So love shmamino ksaver meir shinoi kaina. Really must be the Rameir holds that the shinoi is kaina. In that case, that's why he only pays him back for the wool, and he gets to keep the shebach. And therefore, going back in our case, v'hacha karasu with the kalkanis. Shmamina. And therefore, in our case, we say that the reason why the ganav has to go ahead and give it back is because we don't want the chayt to niskar, and therefore he has to go ahead and pay it back. But really, that the thief, if there's a physical change, he does acquire the item in a new state.
If he brought his wool to the dyer, asked for a voyer, and he gave it to a voyer.
We're not talking about that.
I know, but
so there's no mistake. Then that was
right. But by doing that, was the dyer actually Kona the item?
No, because over there, he was doing what he was he was doing what he was supposed to do, what he was hired to do. And in the case of where he was supposed to make a black, and he made it red, so all of a sudden he changed. He was not doing something for the owner. It was like he was causing damage to something, or stealing something.
The hire of painting, paint the walls white and paint some black.
Right. So in that case, well, he gets to keep it, right? And the question is, in that case, so so he didn't do what he wanted, but can he say, hey, you have to pay for my expenses, or who gets the improvements? Your house was improved, even though you don't like it, it was improved. So maybe the guy is still deserving, the painter, of increasing the value.
If there's a painter in town and suddenly hears a lot of real estate,
Ikadam. Yeah. So some have a different version. So this is not a question. As that question which we had Legabi Rameir is actually a different question, right? By the fact that Rav actually had a different order of the other brisa. Now, what did Rav have? Gazal behema v'iskina, and avadim v'iskino, right? Mishalem kashas hagzela. Divrei Meir says Rabbi Meir. If a guy goes ahead and steals an animal, becomes old, or an eved becomes old, he gives it shas hagzela. He has to pay it back. In other words, keep the old one. You acquired the old one, and here's the cash value for the young eved or the young behem. The Chachamim and the Chachamim say the avad, and when it comes to the avad, in best case, so this is flip flop. No, this is flip flop. Before that was the Chachamim, now it's our mayor. Right? Chachamim say the avad, and over there, only by the avad, the Chachamim say no, you can just give it back and say here, that which is yours. So vada, the mayor pointed this ikadamre shinui kaina. Obviously, Shinu is kaina because he keeps the old aved and he has to go ahead and pay him cash for the value of was, but he stole it. And therefore it's a knas here. Kiki boilon, hachi boilon. Maybe this is the case. Kiko kanis mazid. Do we only give a penalty when it was mazid? But in the case of shagig, there's no knas. But maybe it's the case also. Even in B'shogeg, there's a knas. So what's the case of shogeg? So as we're soon going to see. So let's say like this. Let's say Rami stole land from Randy. And then he sells it to me. Now I make improvements, right? I make improvements to the stolen land, and the land gets returned to the original owner. Turns out it was stolen. So now, who in this case keeps the improvements? Is there a knas also in this case that
that's from Randy, but Randy has to pay you.
Right, but does Randy have to go? Right, so do we say that the guy has to go ahead and reimburse, or do we say not? So let's see. Tashma, chamisha goyvim mina mechrar. So there's 5 scenarios, or 5 where a person we go ahead and collect from something which is meshuchrar, right? Something which is never been sold, not to to anybody else. He still owns it, without any sort of liens, that is owned by somebody else. Veiluhein. Peiros, the Shevach Peiros, which we'll go ahead and explain.
Oh, right.
And Hamakabo love Lozun Benishto, Basishto. So let's say one goes ahead and says, hey, I'm going to go ahead and support, right, my wife's son or daughter, or Viget Chayv Shem Achrayas, or let's say there's a get that they have to go ahead and collect from, but there is no Achrayas. It's not tied to real estate. Or Kshuvas Isha Shem Achrayas. Or maybe the Ksuvas Isha that was not attached to a certain piece of land. And the Sagor says, "Uman Shmias, who's one who holds that Damar Achrayas Lav Tavasof?" In other words, that the Achrayas, right? The Gabe, this Ksuba, right? So who says it's not a mistake? In other words, it's optional for it to be Achrayas. So who is that? Who is that one to say whether it's backed up by land or not? So that's Rabbi Meir. This is Rameir. So therefore, Rameir is the ton of this. Victoria, it says over there, peiros v'shevach peiros. We say either fruits or the shevach of the fruits are collected from Meshuchrar. Now, what is this case? Shevach peiros heichidami. It's going shegazel sadam echavero. Avrami goes ahead and steals a parcel of land from Randy. Umachali achir. And then he goes ahead and he sells it to Yoel. Sells it to me. Vishmicha. Then I go ahead and I improve the land, right? V'harehi. All of a sudden, Randy comes back and says, "Yo, this is my land." Takes it back. Now, I turn to Avrami. I said, "Hello, right? Right? You sold me this land; it's not mine. And what about my improvements?" Right? So in this, so he says, and therefore, and this, and now in this case, it goes out. And therefore, when I go ahead and collect, I go ahead and now, so I bought land from Avrami. Avrami has no money, but he sold land subsequently to somebody else. So I can go ahead and take the land from the principal that I lost out. If I paid $10,000 for land, and he had other lands that he had at the time that he since sold, so I can go to those buyers and take my $10,000 from their land. The shevach, now the shevach. What are all the improvements I put in the land? The shevach minichse b'nei charen. I can only take it from Avrami's lands that he has it are b'nei charen, but not something he sold. The asa bal arva shakel the shivche. Now, if we say that the owner of the land and he took it, all right, and therefore the asabal arav shakil arev shivke. So my la bamaretz, are we not referring to over here in the case of where I was an amaretz? The lo yada, right? The karka nigzal, I didn't exalt. I didn't know whether the karka be stolen or not. And nevertheless, right? So Randy's able to go ahead and take not only the land, but even the shevach. He takes it all, right? So shmami no b'shogeg nami kanis. In this case, also over here, right? Even though it was a case of shogeg, nevertheless he gets it all back. So they say, "Lo, that's not the case." I appreciate the nice compliment, but over here we're talking about a case where the guy knew that karkas ain't an exelis, and therefore he knew that he would know that land is not stolen, and therefore that any shavach would go with it. Nevertheless, since it was done, and so since in this case that so now that he knew about it. So therefore, he couldn't be what's it called? Therefore, since it's not considered to be a case of shogeg, rather it's more of a case of mazid, and therefore we say that he is. That's the reason why it was taken away. So tashma. So what is it? So once again, so now even according to the Sikh we should go back to the same price we saw before. So it's if he gives him wool to go ahead and dye it red, it's a shachar and makes it black. If a shachar black, let's have a other makes it red. Ramer, nice and like the maid simro. He pay him back for the wool. So the maid simro in the maid simro v'shif kolo. It's only he gives it back for the wool, but not for the wool and improvements. Now and if you say even b'shogeg, you also penalize him. So it should be demade some of a shivcha by. Let me say by he should have to go ahead and pay him back everything. But since it was a mistake in the case of the dyer, he just did the wrong color. Even the mazid kanis b'shegeg lo kanis. It's only the mazid that we penalize, b'shegeg, like in this case with the dyer, that he doesn't have to go ahead and b'shegeg lo kanis. We don't go ahead and penalize him for the shevach. Fine, 2 dots. Now we said Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Zela, Chayzeres, Beine, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rainis Akilu, he Shuma Eitzel Bekesef. So he says, Rabbi Yehuda says, basically, it goes back to the time of the theft, and Rabbi Shimon says, we value, how much it is in value. So my Benayu. So what's the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon? Someone at the speed, the Shevach Shal Gabeg Zela Kamifli. We're talking about, right, Shevach that basically improved afterwards. Rabbi Yehuda severed the Nigzal Havi. He says it all belongs to the person who it was stolen from, right? It belongs to the Nigzal Havi. Rabbi Shimon severed the Gazlan Havi. Rabbi Shimon says it belongs to the Gazlan, and that's what it means over there. So,
why? Because he fed it. And
so Rabbi Yehuda says it belongs to the Nigzal because he says right? It goes back. Anyway, but Rabbi Shimon says we evaluate it. In other words, that if it would got to be worth more, then the Gazlan gets to go ahead and keep it. And Rav Papa Amar, and Rav Papa says, no, the Kuli Alma, Shevach Shel Gabig, Zela, the Gazlan. Everyone says, no, the Shevach, the improvements that came afterwards. In other words, if I stole the animal, then I got not me physically, but I arranged for the animal to go ahead and get pregnant, right? Or so I raised it and it grew out its wool. So Shevach Shal Gabig Zela, that belongs to the Gazlan Habi. For Hacha over here, Lamechta L'Shlish Revi Kamiflagi. In other words, over here it's like this: either do I get it all because I was the one who did the improvements, I just had to pay him back for what I stole, the original value, or do we say like this: Lamaisa, I stole that guy's land or his animal, and what happens normally with someone owns something, and I go ahead and do the work. Usually, there's some sort of like a sharecropper. Right, we'll go ahead and we'll divide it. So maybe since it was really his item and I was working it, maybe it should go to like the standard, 50-50, or you get right a partnership. And that's what it means. And over here, maybe they're arguing about whether the new Shevach is a partnership between the two, or do we say that it all belongs to the Gazlan?
I stole the animal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then either I got it pregnant,
right,
or whatever other benefits.
Right.
That would have never transpired had I not done something double usher.
Right.
So why is there even a havamina that I should be able to keep the sheva?
So because you were the one who improved it.
But you got it by theft.
So you have to pay back that what you stole. You pay back. So that person wasn't harmed. So unless you say you give back everything, which is what we saw the takana earlier, which is so ein chayt and iskar, that a person who stole shouldn't be rewarded, right? That was according to the takana by Rebbe that we said earlier. So Rabbi Yehuda saver, shevach shal gabig zela kuli the gazan. So and Rabbi Yehuda holds that really all the shevach that is on the salayim is really kuli the gazan, right? It belongs to the guy who sold it. Rabbi Shimon saver lemachza l'shlish Rabbi Yehuda shakel. No, he has a certain percentage. Who the shakel gazan. That's what the gazan takes. So Tanakh. So let's see the Mishnah. It says Gazel Paravini Sabra Esla Yalda. A guy goes ahead and steals a regular para, then he goes ahead and became pregnant by him, and then gave birth. Or or a sheep came and then grew this wool, then he sheared it. Mishalim Kashas Hagzela. He pays the Shas Hagzela.
Think about it though. What if throwing its wool, if you steal it?
So I guess there's more that's involved. I guess when it grows its wool out, I guess maybe you're right, as opposed to just doing nothing.
You have to give it
Right.
vitamins or something.
Yeah, I don't know. You have to comb it or something.
Has to go to Planet
Just wouldn't be automatic.
I'm not sure exactly what he has to do. Right. But it could be also maybe he got pregnant automatically, but maybe it occurred. His mazel occurred by him. So Mashav and Kashas Exela. So he pays, he writes a check for what it was worth when he stole it on January 1st, not now in June. So it sounds like Yelda'in, Lo Yelja. It says only if it gave birth. In other words, it gave birth and then he has the baby, so he keeps the baby, or he sheared it and he keeps the wool. But if it's Lo Yelda, but if it's not, let's say it's just pregnant or it's full of wool, then Hadrabena, then he should go ahead and return it as is. In other words, that basically the Nigzal, he's going to benefit from the other guy's work, which is not a bad thing. It's just the fact of it. So Bishlam would have
He has to return back to sheared too.
but he didn't shear yet. It's just full of wool. So
Oh.
Bishlam would have So according to the first interpretation of Zvid, he says that all the shevach actually belongs to the person who stole from him. That's why you give it to him, because it was always his. So it's therefore Hamani Rabbi Yehuda. El Rapapa, according to the Rapapa, who says everyone agrees that that the improvements really that was improved belongs to the Gazlan. So if it didn't give birth, why do you give it back pregnant? Hamani la Rabbi Yehuda v'la Rabbi Shimon. It's not Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Shimon. So Rapapa says no. Who adin afilu lo yalda nami k'shas exel no mishal. No. It doesn't mean that if it doesn't give, only if it gives birth, then you give back as is. But if it doesn't, then you keep it. But if it was pregnant, then you would give it back, right, as a pregnant animal. No. Who adin afilu lo yalda also nami k'shas exel with the mishal. He only pays it from the January 1st date, if it's valid then. That which specifically says it became pregnant and gave birth. So I did Nasiv Reisha Yelda, Nasiv Sefer Namaya. Since we wanted to say in the case of the Reisha that he gave birth, so in the case of Sefer we mention this case. And Tani Kavasi Rapapa, we have Bryson for Rapapa, Rabbi Shimon Aimer, Reina Sakila, Hishuma, Esla Bekesef, Lamachta, Lashlish Levi. Now we evaluated as basically it was a partnership between the two, and that goes exactly as Rapapa explained. And Abrabash, when we buy our Kani, we asked. Right, so he says, Rabbi Shimon, who so he says, okay, according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that the Gazlan will take a percentage for his work, when we go ahead and pay him off, is it do we say that he goes ahead and we just pay him out cash, what the value is, or does he get a certain percentage of the meat? We answer from that, which we said in another case, Shloisha Shamin Lahan Hashevach.
Later when the animal chefed it?
Right. In other words, that let's say he has a certain percentage in the calf. So you can't just pay me off now, right? So I physically get it, and therefore, once the animal is shechted, then we pay from itself.
You can't count them monetarily now?
Well, no, either you pay him and the other guy does what he wants with the animal, or we sell the animal. If we're in a partnership in this animal, you can't. If I'm in a partnership with you, you can't just pay me off and it says, okay, this is your percentage, this is we own. It says no. Either we sell the whole item and we each take money, or we wait until the end of the partnership. So we say no. Three cases we evaluate is how much is the shevach. Then we pay them cash. So bechora the pashut. Let's say there's a bechora gets a double portion, so you can go out and pay cash to the pashut, or a baal chayiv l'lokeach. or right, someone a creditor to the buyer, or Balchayv Yisayim, or to Yisayim. So we see over here that in these cases, that you go ahead and you assess it for what it is. In this case, he's the Balchov to the Lokeh. Who says that when it comes to a so a person who owes somebody money to his creditor, right? So we say over there that he gives him over here that he gives him cash, right? So you say that a Baal Chayv does go ahead and so he keeps the shevach, right? So right, excuse me, right? So he says, who says lokeach, right? Who says over here that the creditor gives the buyer, right? You know, he went ahead and he seized the land, but the guy did improvements of the land while he had the loan. So didn't Shmuel say that about Chayiv Gavis that he goes ahead and he takes the improvements without reimbursing, right, the guy who took the loan? Or says no, like kasha kan b'shevach hamigil l'ksafim, the kan b'shevach shein magil l'ksafim. One is right crops that grow basically fully grown crops are basically not really considered to be part of the land. If it's not considered part of the land, so that's where you have to go ahead and reimburse the guy who grew the crops. But if shoulders, right? But if a case of where it didn't grow that much yet, it's still considered to be part of the land. If it's part of the land, then all the shevach goes back to the creditor. All right, we'll stop here. We will continue.